Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a scalable, full-stack monitoring platform. Datadog synthetic monitoring enables you to detect front-end errors and performance errors by analyzing user sessions and receiving actionable alerts. API tests help you detect and debug user-facing issues in critical endpoints and applications. Build and deploy self-maintaining browser tests to simulate user journeys from global locations. Start proactively monitoring your user experience today with a free 14-day trial of Datadog by visiting datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast. That's datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody's doing well today. I'm actually doing the Cloud News of the Week this week. Aaron is on his first trip, I think his first work trip in a very, very long time. And the Cloudcast boys were actually both traveling this week for a little bit of work stuff. Aaron went to Las Vegas, I went to Boston, and right on cue, both of us had terrible airplane experiences. I think his was worse than mine. His flight got canceled. He actually had to go home and fly back the next day. Mine just got delayed like 3 hours because of weather. But anyways, I hope for those of you that do travel or are traveling about, your experiences are slightly better than the ones that we had this week. Anyways, it is a very, very slow Cloud News of the Week, and I think it's because we are getting towards the end of summer, end of August 2022, and most marketing, PR, press teams have basically said, nope, I'm not releasing anything this week. I'm probably not releasing anything too much next week because it's the end of summer. I'm going to enjoy whatever I can because right after Labor Day in the United States starts and fall trade show season starts, everything starts to get wacky and crazy, and you get sales teams and various company things happening in Q3, end of Q3 and Q4. And so this week and next week will probably be pretty slow Cloud News of the Week. But let's hit on a few little things. As most things in technology, for those of you that have been around for a little while, you know that there's never anything that stays the same in technology except for the mainframe and Java. And at some point, everything wants to centralize and then decentralize. And then at some point it centralizes again and decentralizes. And so, we never necessarily get completely new ideas. We just get kind of reincarnation of old ideas with faster chips and more bandwidth. So I bring that up because this week we're starting to see articles written that devs do not want to do ops work. Devs do not want to be involved with any operational things, the is DevOps dead conversation, which I think we had maybe 3 or 4 months ago. It's never dead. Nothing's ever dead in technology, but we are starting to see all those devs who were out there claiming they are full stack engineers, and if they write the code, they want to run it. We're starting to see some blowback on that. I suspect part of it is because people are working very long hours. They're very tired from COVID. COVID still has a lot of lingering effects. We've seen some layoffs. People aren't necessarily getting the big raises. They're not necessarily getting the big stock options and all that stuff. And they're going, hey man, I want to focus on what I want to focus on. I don't want to do everybody's work. So expect to see a bunch of, hey, dev and ops need to be separated things again. So maybe we're going to see dev days and ops days in 2 different rooms or something like that. Twitter, for those of you that follow along, and the controversy going on Twitter has some new controversy this week. I don't usually like to give it any time. I'm not going to give it any time, but if you're into following Twitter, there's some controversy over there, something about security stuff going on. Pay attention to it if you want. Twitter's been a tire fire, dumpster fire since its inception. It still is. Still a great way to meet people, still a great way to sort of learn what's going on, but company's never been run well. YouTube is launching podcasts. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I sort of look at it this way. There are a lot of people who do really awesome podcasts, and there are a lot of people who've really figured out, especially since the pandemic, how to do their podcast as video. They look good. Their backgrounds look good. They stream it. I feel like Aaron and I are sort of like the Wikipedia of podcasts. Like we've always been the same format. We always do things the same way. We will probably not do them as a video. I'm sure there are people who would say, take the audio and load it into a video file and put the face of the person you're talking to. I don't really have the time to do that. But if you guys really want to see us in person, or, I guess see us live or see us talking to our guests live, I guess we could. It's not high on our priority list, but if it's really, really important to you, let us know. We'll sort of take people's temperature and see how it goes. And the last thing I got on my list, and this may end up becoming a Sunday perspective or something, there's a new term floating around out there called quiet quitting. And it's one of those ones I really don't want to get started on. It's basically quiet quitting is, I don't want to quit my job, but I'm just going to do the bare minimum of my job. And quite honestly, and the whole point of this is everybody's going, well, empower workers, managers are working you too hard, all those sort of things. I will say this, as somebody who's been both an individual contributor and a manager and an executive and run his own company, the worst thing you can possibly do to advance your career is to do the most bare minimum that you can do. If you are just doing it for a period of time, you're tired, you're in between what you're doing, you need it for healthcare, whatever, but don't make this a lifestyle. Please don't make me have to do a Sunday conversation about why this is a lifestyle and it's a good thing and all that kind of stuff. It's not a good thing, right? It's doing the bare minimum is never going to be a good thing for your career. So if you're looking to do something for a summer, you want a summer job, fine, do that. But if you're listening to shows like this and others because you want to improve your career, we will never be endorsing this idea of quiet quitting. So, anyways, with that, let's get on to a more interesting topic and a more interesting sort of trend. Aaron had a chance to talk to our good friends from Datadog who like to come and tell us whenever they've collected a bunch of information, a bunch of good metadata, if you will, and context around trends in the industry. They always have really good information about what's been going on in their world, and they're going to come talk to us about the state of serverless right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Lightstep Incident Response, built on the ServiceNow platform used by over 6,000 companies worldwide. Lightstep Incident Response allows you to scale your incident response team without adding to your monthly bill. With intelligent on-call scheduling and escalations, you get the full context of your service health. Lightstep Incident Response immediately pinpoints issues and uses machine learning to send group text, reducing your time to respond. And you can seamlessly orchestrate alert and incident triage with on-call scheduling across Slack, Teams, Zoom, desktop, and mobile. So get started today with a free 30-day trial of Lightstep Incident Response by visiting lightstep.com/cloudcast. That's lightstep.com/cloudcast. And get a free t-shirt after your first alert or incident. Today's show is brought to you by Granulate, an Intel company, and their new offering, gMaestro. gMaestro allows you to reduce your Kubernetes costs by up to 60% with autonomous, continuous workload, and pod right-sizing. With gMaestro, you gain full visibility into your Kubernetes clusters and eliminate over-provisioning without compromising performance or affecting your competitive SLAs. gMaestro can be installed with a single line of code and provides visibility into inefficiencies within your Kubernetes clusters. Users can automatically apply HPA, CPU, and memory request changes that can be employed to save up to 60% on compute costs. And the best part, it's absolutely free. Try gMaestro yourself at granulate.io/gmaestro to begin optimizing your Kubernetes today. That's granulate.io/gmaestro to begin optimizing your Kubernetes today.
And we're back, and really good both topic and guest this week. So, as many know, we've covered serverless here on the Cloudcast for a number of years. And one of the things that's almost become an annual tradition now is digging into the Datadog State of Serverless report. We did it last year as well, and wanted to dig in again because it is probably the single source of truth, if you will, when it comes to really digging in on metrics and state of serverless. And so joined today, we have AJ, engineering lead over at Datadog. How you doing, AJ?
Hey, Aaron, I'm doing great. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So first of all, welcome to the show. But you've been around the serverless market for quite a while now. So tell everyone a little bit about your background and, of course, your focus at Datadog.
Sure, absolutely. So my background lies in kind of building SaaS apps. My early career history out of school was working at a tech startup in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I think I reached for my first Lambda function in late 2016, early 2017. From there, I kind of picked up the serverless framework and built a couple of really useful and interesting applications that really helped out the company I was working at the time, where we were at, especially in our development space. We were sort of at a point where the company had grown really fast. We had acquired a number of other companies, other small startups, and that led to our operations team being stretched super thin. So I was sort of given a mandate to go off and hit these deadlines and build these applications. And I didn't really have the traditional ops team that I was used to. So coming from a Ruby on Rails background, it was like pretty hard for me to try and figure out, how to build apps on EC2 or how we would do that securely. So I looked around and picked up the serverless framework. And the productivity gains I had with this were just, it's really hard to to even fathom how much more productive I was at the time from hacking on shell scripts and early days of CloudFormation to serverless framework. It was just like such an increase in productivity, and I just fell in love with it. So I worked on that service for a number of years, and eventually the team behind the serverless framework actually reached out. They had started a company. So I hopped over there for another few years. Worked on the serverless framework and serverless framework adjacent applications for a while there, and decided I really wanted to focus on the serverless observability space. So made a few phone calls and knew a few folks at Datadog, and the fit was right. So I've been here for just about a year and change now, focused on the serverless application performance monitoring and kind of all things serverless space here at Datadog.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Now, I will add too, we've heard, over the years, just fantastic things about the serverless framework. And Brian and I were at Serverless Conf, I want to say it was in Austin, and had a long chat with the folks there. And it was really great to catch up with them. And that's years ago now, but it was great to see the product evolve over time. So
yeah,
let's dig in. Adoption of serverless, first of all, in all the major clouds. Year over year and kind of historically, have the offerings in each of the clouds, like, are we at the point where they're kind of all the same and it's becoming somewhat of a commodity? Or do you think, like, at the end of the day, certain features are factoring into using multiple clouds? Like, tell everyone a little bit about the 10,000 foot view of all of this.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. At a high level, the laughable answer is both, right? Like some of the offerings have commodified. I think I kind of like to go off on tangents a lot, but compute specifically, I think we've seen commodify in the serverless space. I think that's a good thing for serverless developers, serverless customers. I don't think they're all at the same level, and in fact, it's kind of hard to say. It's very hard to level set across any of the clouds anyway, because their offerings are growing. They're a lot different. So I think that it's been really interesting in these last couple of years, because we're seeing AWS, which traditionally launched with Lambda and kind of were the early movers in the serverless space. They've now started playing catch up in other areas. We've seen them introduce App Runner, which is a scale by concurrency instead of scale by function invocation. And that's more similar to like how Cloud Run works. I think that's very interesting development that's kind of happening recently. But these offerings in the clouds are continuing to be pretty unique, and there's different offerings and different aspects of each cloud which are very different. That is partly what made or what makes these multi-cloud infrastructure as code systems really hard, because not only are the individual managed queues, managed data stores, managed compute, and kind of those serverless products that we love, they're all different. They also integrate differently, and that makes it kind of hard to kind of roll out one framework that can kind of go anywhere. But ultimately, we're definitely seeing the fact that I think serverless adoptees, users of serverless technology, they're not necessarily focused primarily on being, like a multi-cloud or optimizing their software or development practices for multi-cloud. I think predominantly they're focused on just shipping software, right, to users quickly, and they think that prioritizing time to market is key for their business. And I think that's what's really factoring into serverless adoption in each cloud.
Makes sense. Thank you for that, AJ. And kind of, I wanted to move on to programming languages, because this one I found fascinating. So Node.js and Python lead the way. That's no surprise there. I mean, that's been that way,
totally.
I think, as long as serverless has been around. But what I found fascinating was most companies are using 3+ languages. Are you surprised by the breadth of that as well, or can you help elaborate maybe with a little bit of the why behind that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And this is one of my most favorite facts about this year's State of Serverless report. Python and Node have historically been the dominant languages used to build serverless applications for a number of good reasons. But what I love seeing is these languages we typically associate with more enterprise services or more enterprise companies that are kind of being brought to serverless Lambda functions. So we've got, Java, Go, and .NET are really, really ramping up. And when you see the fact that like most organizations are using, 3 or more languages, I think that's very telling, right? I think serverless starts as glue code in a lot of companies. People have, 1 or 2 needs that don't quite fit into an application or service-oriented architecture that they have today, but they just need to glue these 2 pieces together, right? So they reach for Lambda, and it's just so easy to get started with Python or Node, and they kind of start there. Now that goes on for a year, 2 years, and then eventually they have another need that comes up, and this time they want to take Lambda more toward the core of their application, and that's where you start to see like .NET and Java start to enter into the picture here. So I think that's really telling of kind of the growth and maturity of serverless as it's adopting these. We're seeing this growth for these languages that are common in enterprises that are really entering this space right now. So surprised, I don't know if I'd say surprised, but I would say I'm encouraged by it.
Fair. And do you think we're at a point where in another couple years, maybe the top 2 is different?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I love speculation. It would be hard to see anything overtaken maybe the next couple of years, but I don't want to, never say never, right? I do think that it is just a common pattern for Node and Lambda, or Python and Lambda be like the first move into serverless for organizations. But it wouldn't surprise me if we just saw more and more people reaching straight for those languages, which they already are using everywhere. At the same time, these serverless offerings, they're getting more performant, right? Early on in Lambda, we would see massive cold start penalties for compiled languages like Java or Go, and now we're seeing those start to improve, steadily every year. And that's one of the benefits of serverless, right? Like you invest in somebody else owning and maintaining the platform and improving it from underneath you, and you get these performance benefits without you having to do anything on your end. So, I could totally see a world if all runtimes had the same, performance characteristics, and you could just bring whatever language you're most comfortable with to a serverless platform. Yeah, I could absolutely see any number of these languages, or perhaps a new one we haven't seen yet taking over. Next couple of years, maybe not, but 5-10 years, I think you could definitely see it.
Okay. And another one that is, so again, I tried cherry picking some nuggets out of the report.
Yeah, pick your favorite.
I just found this fascinating, but it was also kind of surprising. So 50% of all serverless is tied to API gateway usage. And I don't know, I guess in my head, I expected it to be tied more to event-driven services. And so I'm just wondering, how are folks using this? And maybe you could give us a little insight into why that API gateway usage was so high in this context.
Yeah, I thought this was also pretty fascinating. And I think there's other aspects of this fact, right, of like what's invoking Lambda functions. That's like really, really interesting. But ultimately, the lowest abstraction that's common across, the common language we speak on the web is like an HTTP request. So I think it's a very natural way to have people start. And at the same time, developers that maybe you've got developers that are like, long-time backend API developers that are going to reach for, an API integration probably first. And then you've also got, other users that are potentially more like Jamstack developers that are going to reach for their first, serverless function and their first kind of backend implementation. And it's also probably going to be an API. So I think that sort of explains why it's so popular. It's the lowest common denominator as far as integrations into other services. And again, as we said, like serverless code is very popular for glue code to kind of put 2 different pieces together. So if you just need a webhook and you're going to have like some company's going to integrate with your company, maybe like a weekly report or something, it's just so much easier to say, okay, here's an endpoint you can hit, we'll handle the creation of the, pre-signed S3 URL, and you can drop your PDF file there, and then we'll get this event afterwards. But it's common to have that API first kind of step.
Yeah.
That being said, I think one of the most interesting things on this is just the meteoric rise of EventBridge. I'm looking at the report now, and the third most common integration for Lambda functions or an event bridge event. And that's a very new service. It's only a few years old. I personally really enjoy working with it. I think it's a great developer experience. I think that it's the kind of thing that can be the central nervous system or the core of your serverless application, because it allows you to really embrace that event first kind of event driven architecture in a user friendly way. And that did surprise me that it was so high up, but I'm also rooting for it because I'm a fan.
Sure, fair. And I'll add this too. And I don't remember the exact source, but I just saw it on Twitter actually right before we jumped on the call here, and I actually retweeted it as well. I know there's kind of been a Gartner report, or Gartner statistics floating around of like, oh, this percentage is, of the web is API driven now, and and further breakdowns from there, and apparently they just released an updated one for 2022 as well, and it basically has jumped to, I forget the exact total, but it was 90+% is all APIs now.
Wow.
And then it was 80 to 90% in all the other categories as well, when some of the other categories were maybe like 50.
Wow.
So it's safe to say APIs are here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's not that, other integrations aren't great, right? Like you've got other protocols, you've got other, like gRPC is a common way that backend services are going to communicate in the cloud. I think we'll see more of that. I think that sort of thing will creep in. Binary payloads versus like JSON or protobuf are certainly popular. I think we'll probably see more of that, but it's just so easy to be able to hand a URL to somebody, and it's really the common language of the web. So I do see that to continue to be super popular, but event bridge is creeping up. I don't know if we'll ever see like a complete takeover versus like all the various ways you can invoke a Lambda function via a HTTP URL. There's several now, but I was really, really surprised to see event bridge take off like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic insight. Thank you. And AJ, let me ask you this. Let's talk about containers for a little bit as well. There's been a decent bit of variety in the usage patterns between the cloud offerings, and whether it's ECS, Kubernetes, or Cloud Run, Azure Container Instances. Is this like an indication that portion of the market and those usage patterns associated with it, are they like still evolving, or I'm just trying to understand a little bit of like, why was there so much flux there?
So the space is really in flux, and I think it'll continue to stay in flux as these cloud providers are sort of figuring out where users want to consume, compute from them, be it something that the users get to kind of manage and decide what type of instances they're running versus something like, Fargate ECS, where you can sort of just launch a task, but it'll run and consume and work on multiple requests at the same time. You have that sort of offering coming in on App Runner, as well as GCP and container instances. All of those are really taking off, right? Cloud Run we're seeing it grow really fast. We're seeing container instances grow really, really fast, compared to Azure Functions. And we're seeing like all of these different compute options for AWS as well take off. And I think the cloud providers are trying to find that balance of what developers want. I am certainly intrigued by the scaling factor of concurrent requests. I think that's a common denominator between container instances, Cloud Run, and App Runner, where you can sort of deploy a container and say, okay, once I hit 500 concurrent requests, give me another container. I think that's really interesting because it sort of strikes a really nice balance between just run my code, but also, don't over provision things, which you can sort of get into in some function as a service environments. But ultimately, the other part of your question was containers. And I think that is a settled score, my friend. The second Lambda introduced the ability to deploy containers on top of, on Lambda versus a zip file, that sort of ended the debate. Everywhere else, containers are the standard. I think they've certainly won the packaging debate as far as how we deploy cloud native applications. And in serverless as well as in other offerings like ECS, EKS, Fargate, etc.
Yep. Okay. And let's talk about Datadog for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of the flux we just talked about, how have the Datadog serverless tools had to evolve and keep up with all the changes? And you said you've been there About a year. I'm sure
Mhm.
it's been a pretty crazy year with all the changes happening in the serverless market.
Yeah, Aaron, it has been a wild year. I'm really enjoying it. I kind of thrive in that sort of environment. But yeah, it is fast paced. The cloud providers are really, they're competing. They're competing. They want your dollar as a developer. I think never been a better time to be a serverless developer right now because there's so much competition. On our side, we provide tools for all of our partners. We try and be good launch partners and be ready, on day one when a new feature comes out on any of these clouds or these serverless offerings. We try and have support for it in Datadog. It's a really, really important aspect of what we do. We've been working with the cloud providers. We famously with Lambda, work with their team on Lambda extensions, which allowed Datadog's agent to sort of run as a sidecar. Early in the serverless kind of Lambda lifecycle, we would have to run our telemetry, inside of your Lambda function, which isn't the best customer user experience, right? We want to make sure that we can collect all this data and aggregate it, batch it, compress it, and send it back asynchronously outside of like the hot path of your Lambda function running. So we were able to do that with them, and I think we're continuing to, on the other side of things, integrate with tools developers love. So we have like a serverless plugin, we have a CDK construct, we have a CloudFormation macro. We're whatever tool you want to use to deploy these services, these serverless services, we're ready for. We're also we've got our own CLI tool that can kind of instrument just generic Lambda functions in your AWS account. And, other clouds, of course, we've got tools for their various infrastructure as code tools as well.
Nice. Okay. So I'm going to close it out maybe a little differently. I got one more question.
Sure.
For you.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges, are serverless developers facing today, right? Because we're talking about all these advancements and things are getting better, but it's not perfect, right? So,
Totally.
So what are some of the big things that really come top of mind today?
Yeah, I think there are three things that serverless developers that are really kind of dealing with. You can even like step back and say like, what are organizations who are adopting serverless really facing? I think the first is the infrastructure as code tools that allow you to sort of define what kind of serverless application you want to build and deploy it. Those are still evolving, right? Like we talked about in the top of the call, or the top of the podcast, we've got the serverless framework. It's been around for a long time, but we've also got, CDK, architect framework, serverless stack. All of these different tools are available now, along with other tools that are more vendor agnostic. You've got like Terraform that's out there, and then all of the clouds like themselves, CloudFormation, ARM templates, and Bicep on Azure. All of these things are sort of existing or coming out to fruition today, but it's still nebulous. And when if you Google like, okay, serverless GCP or serverless Azure or serverless AWS, you're going to have 1,000 different options. So I think that's a big challenge is what tool would an organization pick, and how do you even decide? It's a bit of a chicken and the egg situation where you sort of have to have tried a few before you know which one is going to be best for you. But that's very much a challenging thing right now. And I would encourage folks to definitely pick an infrastructure as code tool. It's going to, in the long run, it's going to pay off. The second thing I think is cloud competency. Serverless applications are a combination of services which you pay for only what you use, but they're still different services. And you sort of have to understand the compute parts and the data parts and the API gateway parts, and the queues and the topics and the asynchronous communication and kind of streaming software and blob storage. All of those are a little bit different. I think the biggest one there in all of that list, though, is identity and access management. Poorly secured blob storage as 3 buckets is one of the biggest causes of data leaks for companies today. It's a serious issue. Developers have to learn it and take it seriously. And it's just not something that, they teach in schools or boot camps, or, new graduates really have to develop that. They have to get used to that. There's not an operations person manning the firewall anymore, right? You have to sort of do that yourself. I think the final thing that a lot of serverless developers are facing is, look, serverless services, they're distributed systems. By default, you have to kind of understand the trade-offs and the different consequences of the decisions you're making, of the tools you're using, because it's unlike running a Ruby on Rails server and having active record and an ORM and one MySQL instance sort of get you there. you've got a system that's ready to scale up to huge numbers of requests per second and huge amounts of throughput. But you really have to understand how it's working under the hood for you to take full advantage of that. Famously, like Alex Dubri's DynamoDB guidebook is very popular resource for folks who are learning how to model data in a non-relational database. And it's a type of thing that it's designed to be a distributed system because those are reliable, those scale really well, they're fault tolerant, they have all these qualities we like. But at its first level, when you first try them out, you don't realize what you're interacting with. And I think like developing that distributed systems knowledge is key to organizations embracing serverless. So I think those are the three things: developer experience, cloud competency, and distributed systems knowledge.
Fantastic. Great answer. And I'll add this too real quick when you're talking about the competency portion. Yeah, I will just say it's really become famously the answer for a lot of things because the I'll say destruction of the perimeter and your point of no one managing the firewalls, right? And yeah, when everyone's learning, you just want to learn how to make things run, and no one takes enough time to learn how to secure it on top of it.
Yeah, it's key. It really is. And it's just we're also seeing a convergence of the DevOps movement. Developers are doing a lot of their own operations now. That's something we see a lot in Datadog. Like our users are developers. They're not necessarily people that are just in charge of running the infrastructure. And serverless specifically, right? Like you're offloading a portion of that responsibility. In AWS's shared responsibility model, you offload a portion of that to AWS, but you're still in charge of telling Amazon how to enforce your identity and access management policies. You still have to make sure that you're not allowing anybody to access your S3 bucket. There's only so much they can help you through that. Yep. So that's a key. For organizations adopting serverless.
Yeah, it's your typical the shared responsibility model in the cloud, right?
Yep.
All right. So AJ, with that, I'm going to close us out. Thank you so much for your time. And I will say, everyone, if you're interested in this, and I would encourage you, please go check out the State of Serverless report for 2022. The link is in there, as well as links to everything Datadog as well. So I'm going to close us out for this week on behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it. Thank you to everyone who listens, and thank you for continuing to tell a friend, to rate us if you have that ability wherever you get your podcast. And as always, we would love to receive your feedback as well, and ideas for guests is always welcome in addition. So with that, I'm going to close us out, and thank you very much, AJ, and we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.